The door at the end of the hall, Sophie. Miller had always believed that life had a strange way of pushing people toward places they were meant to be, even if those places didn't feel right at first. When she signed the lease for the apartment on Raven Street, she felt a mix of relief and unease. Relief because she finally had a place of her own after months of searching. Unease because the building itself felt wrong. Not dangerous, not dirty, not haunted in the cliché sense. Just wrong, like a song slightly out of tune or a painting where the colors didn't match. The landlord, Mr. Halden, was a thin man with a stiff posture and a voice that always sounded like he was whispering even when he wasn't. He handed her the keys with a strange hesitation, his fingers lingering on the metal for a second too long. Then he pointed down the hallway, toward a door at the very end. It was old, the paint peeling, the handle rusted. "Don't open that one," he said. "It stays locked. Always." Sophie laughed awkwardly, thinking he was joking. But his expression didn't change. His eyes didn't blink. "Why?" she asked. "It's better that way," he replied. "For everyone." He didn't explain further. He simply turned and walked away, leaving Sophie standing in the hallway with a key ring that suddenly felt heavier than it should. The first few days passed quietly. She unpacked her boxes, arranged her furniture, and tried to ignore the strange atmosphere of the building. The walls were thick, the floors creaked in odd rhythms, and the lights flickered even when the bulbs were new. But she told herself it was just an old building. Nothing more. At night, she slept with the window slightly open, letting the cool air drift in. The city outside was calm, the streetlights casting long shadows across her room. She liked the quiet, she liked the feeling of being alone. But on the fifth night, everything changed. She woke up at 3:12 a.m. The room was silent, too silent. Even the distant hum of traffic was gone. She sat up slowly, her heart beating faster for reasons she couldn't explain. Then she heard it. 3 slow knocks. They echoed through the hallway, deep and hollow, like someone knocking on a wooden coffin. Sophie froze. She waited. The knocks came again, exactly the same rhythm. 3 knocks. Silence. 3 knocks. Silence. She got out of bed and walked toward the hallway, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The air felt heavier, thicker, as if the apartment itself was holding its breath. She reached the end of the hallway and stared at the forbidden door. The knock stopped. She pressed her ear against the wood. Nothing. No breathing, no movement, no whisper. Just silence. She went back to bed, telling herself it was the pipes. Old buildings always made noise. She repeated that sentence until she fell asleep. But the next night, the knocking returned. Louder, closer, more insistent. And this time, there was a whisper. A soft, trembling voice that slid through the cracks of the door like cold air. "Let me out." Sophie stumbled backward, her heart pounding. She turned on every light in the apartment and stayed awake until sunrise. The next morning, she called the landlord. His voice trembled when she mentioned the door. "You didn't open it, did you?" he asked. "No," she said, "but something is inside." There was a long pause. "Don't touch that door," he said. "Don't speak to it, don't listen to it. Whatever is inside, it doesn't forget." Then he hung up. Sophie stared at her phone, her hand shaking. She didn't know what he meant. She didn't want to know. But the knocking continued every night, growing louder, more desperate, more human. and the whisper began saying her name. Sophie. She hadn't told anyone she moved in. She hadn't updated her address. No one knew she lived there, no one, except whatever was behind that door. One night, unable to take it anymore, she walked down the hallway with a flashlight. The air felt thick, almost liquid. She reached the door and touched the handle. It was warm. Too warm. The whisper came again, trembling, pleading. Please. Her hand shook as she turned the handle. The lock clicked open. The door creaked slowly, revealing darkness, a darkness so deep it felt alive. She stepped inside. The door slammed shut behind her, and the room remembered her what the room wants. The darkness inside the room felt alive. Sophie stood completely still, her breath shallow, her fingers trembling around the flashlight that refused to turn back on. The air was thick, almost suffocating, as if the room itself was breathing with her. She could hear faint whispers coming from the walls, not loud enough to understand, but close enough to feel them brushing against her skin like cold fingertips. She took a step forward, and the floor creaked beneath her. The sound echoed unnaturally, stretching far longer than it should have, as if the room was repeating it back to her. She raised her hand and touched the wall. It pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. She pulled her hand away immediately. Her eyes adjusted slowly to the darkness, revealing the faint outlines of the names carved into the walls. Hundreds of them. Some scratched, deep, others barely visible. She walked along the wall, her fingers hovering just above the surface. The names seemed to whisper as she passed them, each one releasing a tiny breath of sound. Then she saw it again. Her name, Sophie Miller. Written in fresh red ink, the letters still glistening as if they had been written moments ago. She stumbled backward, her heart pounding. She didn't understand how her name could be there. She had never been in this room before. No one knew she lived here. No one except the landlord. And whatever was inside. A soft sound came from behind her. A footstep, slow, dragging. She turned around, but the darkness swallowed everything. She couldn't see anything, but she felt it, a presence, watching her, waiting. The whisper came again, closer this time. You opened my door. Sophie's breath caught in her throat. She backed away until her shoulders pressed against the wall. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, hundreds of voices speaking at once. She covered her ears, but the sound was inside her head, vibrating through her skull. The flashlight flickered once, then turned on by itself. The beam illuminated a figure standing in the corner of the room. Pale skin stretched tightly over sharp bones, hollow eyes that seemed too deep, too dark, lips cracked and dry, hair long and tangled. It looked like her grandmother. Clara, Sophie whispered. The figure tilted its head slowly like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Then it smiled, a wide, unnatural smile that stretched too far. I waited so long, it said. Sophie tried to run, but the floor beneath her feet shifted, the wood bending like soft clay. She fell to her knees, her hands sinking into the floor as if it were alive. The whispers grew louder, the names on the walls glowing faintly, pulsing like veins. The figure moved closer, its footsteps slow and deliberate. You came back, it whispered. Just like I knew you would. Sophie shook her head, tears streaming down her face. I don't know you, she said. I don't know what you want. The figure crouched in front of her, its face inches from hers. Its breath was cold, colder than anything she had ever felt. The room remembers, it said. It remembers everyone who belongs to it. Sophie tried to pull her hands free from the floor, but the wood tightened around her fingers, holding her in place. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the room. The figure leaned closer. "You were born for this," it whispered. "Just like your grandmother, just like all the others." The walls pulsed again, the names glowing brighter. Sophie felt something crawling up her arms, invisible hands gripping her skin, pulling her deeper into the floor. "No," she whispered. "Please, no." The figure stood up slowly, its body twisting unnaturally. "You opened the door," it said. "Now you stay." The room shook violently, the whispers turning into screams. Sophie felt herself sinking deeper, the floor swallowing her inch by inch. She reached for the door, but it was too far. Too late, the last thing she saw was her name glowing on the wall, brighter than all the others. Then everything went dark. Final part, what the landlord knows. When the landlord arrived the next morning, the hallway was silent. The air felt heavy, as if the building itself was holding a secret. He walked slowly toward the door at the end of the hallway. It was closed, locked, just as it should be. He placed his hand on the handle. It was cold again, lifeless. He let out a long, tired sigh. Another one gone. He didn't open the door. He never did. He simply turned around and walked away, his footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. Later that night, a new tenant moved into the building, a young man named Daniel. He smiled politely, thanked the landlord for the keys, and walked toward his new apartment. As he passed the end of the hallway, he paused. He looked at the old door, the paint peeling, the handle rusted. "What's in there?" he asked casually. The landlord forced a smile. "Just storage," he said. "Nothing important." Daniel nodded and continued walking. But as he reached his apartment, he heard it. 3 slow knocks. He turned around, confused. The hallway was empty. Then he heard a whisper, soft, trembling, familiar. "Sophie." The landlord closed his eyes, knowing the room had chosen again. The room always remembered. And it never forgot a name.